Bad news yesterday, the passing of veteran composer Professor Mzilikazi Khumalo. The linguistics professor and choral music icon passed away after a long illness. Let's speak now to the Minister of Arts, Culture and Sport, Nathi Mthethwa. Minister, good evening. Thank you so much for your time. How would you describe the contribution made by Professor Khumalo?
Thank you very much, Sally, and your viewers. First and foremost, Professor Khumalo was an outstanding artist that made the best out of history and culture, particularly culture for the Zulu nation. He composed mainly his music was based on poems and king's praises. In a way, you know, he was beating the odds and decolonizing music itself and compose classic works based on African tonology and rhythm. So in other words, South Africa has lost a cultural giant, an authority on African languages, somebody who would start things. For instance, the first African opera which featured mainly Princess Makoko, again, another accomplished giant in terms of traditional and indigenous music.
Also, and this is something that we'll all relate to and we'll never forget, because he's integral to the national anthem that we sing. He was part of that team that created the amalgamation of Nkosi Sikelel' Africa and DSTEM as our democracy was born at a very difficult time in our transition. That could not have been an easy thing to do, so high with sensitivities. Tell us a little bit more about that.
You know, whenever we think about that process, it gives you a sense of a man himself. That when you talk Professor Mzilikazi Khumalo, you are actually talking about somebody who was very clear about the identity. Maybe the name itself, his name was prophesying something, because Mzilikazi himself was a Khumalo chief who went all the way during King Shaga's time to Zimbabwe to establish Amandebele there. Now, when it came to post-democracy and when everybody was not clear, some people wanting more of African exclusively, and others wanted to go back to where we were during colonial and apartheid times, he understood unity in diversity. And that's how, as somebody who was very central in the putting together the national anthem which we have today here in the country, that's why his contribution will never be forgotten, because when you talk of people who have foresight of building nations and who understand that everyone in this country, South Africa indeed belongs to all who live in it. And based on that understanding, he was able to steer the process itself.
Are you able to give us any details on his funeral arrangements, bearing in mind, of course, that we're now under level 3 of the lockdown, so everything is curtailed, but what can you tell us?
Well, we have not had, in fact, we're still reeling in shock, and who have been able to interact with his peers. One of such is Professor Mzilikazi Khumalo, who's based in KwaZulu-Natal. So we'll hear how things go. But for now, it's even difficult to ask such questions, especially when this thing is still very fresh.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm sure the details will come through in due time. Minister, while I have you, I have to just ask you a couple more questions. First of all, the recent name changes. Port Elizabeth is now Gqeberha. I know that you've confirmed that that is a done deal, along with all the other name changes that you announced recently. Should we look ahead? Are there going to be more name changes? Have you got more plans?
Well, yes, Sally. Actually, I've just finished meeting all the provincial legislatures, impressing upon them that it is imperative that we decolonize our public spaces. They have a duty to do that, especially because if you remember the process of the TRC, one of the outcomes thereof was that not everyone is going to be getting reparations, monetary-wise and so on. But TRC itself said one of the ways of healing the wounds of the past is that those who have been violated, fighting for freedom in this country, should find expression in the names in public spaces. So yes, we are forging ahead, and we are accelerating the transformation of the heritage landscape.
Can you give me a sneak preview of which names are under consideration for change?
The public awareness which I've embarked upon, as I said, with the provincial legislatures, all the 9 of them, the National House of Traditional Leaders and SALCA, were meant to say to them, because the process must be initiated at the local level, we're meant to say to them that we are going for the 3rd decade in democracy. The formerly oppressed majority are still a cultural minority in public spaces, and it cannot be. It can remain that way.
All right. Well, we'll wait to hear from you on that. I do have to ask you one question. We know, especially here in Gauteng, we're so concerned our COVID numbers are so extraordinarily high. The Premier wants more restrictions. He thinks they're absolutely critical. The President has hinted that we've got to start looking at that. We know that the Provincial Command Council met yesterday. We do know that in terms of process, Cabinet Ministers are part of the National Coronavirus Command Council. Are you able to tell us whether you have met to discuss this issue yet, or is it still to happen?
Well, it's still to happen, Sally. We were meant to meet today, but we meet later. So as soon as we meet, you'll definitely know, because it's quite a worrying trend. As you hear that most of the provinces have reached the 3rd phase in reality. So it's really worrying that this kind of a situation continues, especially because we know that it goes with the losing of lives as a nation, also the livelihoods, which is suffering a great deal. So yes, we definitely would revert to the public after the meeting of the cabinet.
Very quickly, when is that meeting? Is it tonight or tomorrow?
No. It was supposed to be today. It's postponed, and will be informed when exactly.
All right.
It has. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for telling us that and for chatting to us about Professor Khumalo as well. We do appreciate your time. That was the Minister of Arts, Culture and Sport, Nathi Mthethwa, of course, talking about the loss of composer Professor Mzilikazi Khumalo. And a really sad day it is, and a great cultural loss indeed.